and important show. The number to call in with questions is 296-5467. If you're calling from off island, the area code is 808-296-5467. Call in anytime with questions. Joining us today is Matthew Digeronimo, an exciting name. Matthew is a retired naval officer with a formal education in nuclear engineering and business administration. He is the founder and senior managing director for Hawaii's largest mergers and acquisitions / business brokerage company, Smith Floyd Hawaii. Matt hosts the Smith Floyd Water Cooler, a weekly 1-hour Wednesday morning radio show dedicated to starting, buying, operating, saving, expanding, and or selling a privately held business. The show airs live every Wednesday morning from 11 a.m. to 12 on this very station. I'd like to start our show today with some statistics. You sent me some statistics, Matt. Thank you, by the way, for being on the show. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for having me. This is an honor and a pleasure, and I'm excited to chat with you.
Well, you shared me some pretty interesting statistics here. Something about family businesses comprising of 90% of all business enterprises in North America.
Unbelievable, right?
So 90% of all business is small business. And what is a small business?
Well, I guess it depends who you ask.
Okay.
Right. In our day-to-day language, we think of a small business as, if you ask the average person, they'd probably say less than 20 employees, less than 25 employees. The conversation often gets, there's some curveballs in the conversation when we start to talk about government policies that affect small business, because by definition, the federal government has a very convoluted definition of small business, which is a factor of which industries and a handful of other things. So, for example, in the eyes of the federal government, a manufacturing company with 499 employees is a small business.
Really? So it just depends on your industry? Is that it?
Well, it's a very complicated definition by government standards. Same thing with a hedge fund that could have 2 people running it, but they do $75 gazillion. That's a small business. That's why sometimes we see things on television that'll, like Bank of America will say, in 2012 we loaned $35 bazillion to small businesses this year. Like, maybe. So this is not the small business. This is the small business we think.
So this is has it always been this way? This new statistic that was released, or is this a relatively new phenomenon?
No, I think if we looked at, certainly in the course of human events, and more specifically our country, small business has always been the backbone of the society and always has comprised a much larger percentage of economic activity and growth. I think the disconnect comes from the fact that ordinarily these topics are relegated to the back pages of our mainstream media, because it's a lot sexier to talk about Fortune 500 companies than it is sort of mom and pop stores.
So most of our businesses are mom and pop. Here in Hawaii, I feel that way too. I myself am a small business owner, so I get it. And then that brings me to this other breaking news item that we talked about, which is it came out in CNN Money. This was just yesterday, about how the flu outbreak is killing some small businesses because they can lose customers at a rate of 1 per day if someone's out with the flu. I'm sure you know about the new flu bug. Have you been vaccinated? Do you know about it?
No, I don't do vaccinations.
Oh, well, you might after reading this article. Some of these people were out for a long period of time. And if you think about it, here in Hawaii, we have mostly service-based industries. My company's a service-based industry, so I get it. If you're out sick, sometimes you're not earning money. And if your company is structured in that way, you're gonna have some problems when you're out for a month, with the flu.
Sure.
So, and that brings us back to our big topic, which is the secret to small business success in Hawaii. Exciting, huh? And so I guess defining what a small business is and seeing the kind of things that can threaten it is a good place to start.
Sure.
And so going back to some of these other statistics that you sent me, which are really interesting, I was thinking about multi-generational businesses. There are some here in Hawaii.
Absolutely.
And they've been here for sometimes over 100 years.
Absolutely.
And according to the statistics you sent, only 30% of family businesses in America will be passing the reins to the next generation, even though close to 70% would like to keep their business in the family. So only 30% move on, multi-generational. and 90% is small business. So that a very good portion of businesses are not going to be. Once you die, the business dies with you, right?
You're getting right to the heart of the matter here.
Really?
Because oftentimes discussion about how do you keep a small business in play through multi-generational transitions or through a business sale, we tend to compartmentalize and think that that is just about that business, right? So the landscaping company that's been around for 50 years, the reality of the matter is the compound effect of all this is going to play out here in Hawaii and nationwide unless we can somehow prepare small businesses to more successfully turn these businesses over to the next generation or prepare them for a successful sale. Because there's a couple things working against them. One is, I mean, we talked the statistic that you mentioned really just kind of demonstrates the fact that most business owners who create a business would like to turn it over to the second generation. But what we're seeing is that the younger generation is just not as entrepreneurial as the previous generation.
Really?
Well, I mean, we grew up with, you go to school, you get a degree, and you work for a big company. There's just, there's a disproportionate number of our small businesses are owned by the generation that is nearing or past the typical age of retirement. Not only are less of them turning over to the second generation because the second generation doesn't necessarily want to or for other reasons. You know, further down the page there, we talk about when it is a second generation business, nationwide, those businesses, their success rate borders around 25%. So 25% of businesses that are second generation succeed, 75% fail. And then it gets even crazier. Third generation, you have single digit success rate in third generation businesses. So what we're talking about survival of small businesses, it can impact the family and their potential financial security, and that's the number one thing that's most important to me when we work with our clients. But from a broader perspective, this phenomena compounded across the state and across the nation is going to impact our economy because if these businesses don't turn over to the next generation and they're not prepared to sell the business, which is some of the things that we're going to talk about, well then when you shut the doors and walk away, you've lost jobs, and that economic activity associated with that business just gone.
Well, and you're also saying that this generation has a hard time starting a business, or is not as motivated. Would you feel that, or do you feel that they are motivated, but maybe the climate for business here is much more difficult than it was 20 or 30 years ago?
Well, that's a good question. I think, if we talk about this generation, it kind of might depend on what we're talking about, because if we're talking about the people who are graduating college now, I think are more entrepreneurial than, say, those that are about 20 years older than them. At about my age, I would say between like the age of like 28 and 45, that current group really grew up with the notion that to be successful, you go to college and then you get a job with a company that takes care of you. That is success. Oh, small business? Oh, that's for the kids that were in wood shop and can't figure out how to get a job inside of a larger corporation. That's my personal opinion of why that gap in the age of our entrepreneurs exists. I am seeing the newer generation being much more entrepreneurial minded. That's a whole nother topic though, because they tend to be, in my observations, they're very much focused on tech startups and looking for venture capital money and angel investors, where old school entrepreneur is like, print out a business card and get to work, go make some money.
Yeah, like you mentioned earlier, landscaper. You don't have any new landscape businesses probably getting started by young entrepreneurs. They're out instead wanting to start up the next Facebook and looking for VC. And I think what you're saying is backed up by Reid Hoffman's recent book, The Startup of You. I don't know if you've read it, but it tells exactly that climate that you're talking about. that we had this, typical staircase that everyone could expect to climb after they graduate from a college with a simple, bachelor degree, and now they have to go out and get creative. You have to have 3 jobs just to survive.
Well, that's right. And really, if you think about it, if you look at the course of human history on this planet, probably, I'm speculating here, but I'm probably pretty close. Like 99% of them have had to figure out a way to add value to their community so that they could feed their families. And I think that this phenomena recently of, well, just get a job, and then you're done, or get an education, and then you're done, kind of has run its course. And so we're seeing more and more maybe the weaknesses of a college education playing out. And I don't say the weaknesses, but I'm just saying, like, just because you have a college degree doesn't mean that you can come into your company. So you need a new person in your company. You want them to add value. You're not there to. You're not an advanced school for them, right? They need to add value to your company. And I think based on what you told me, I think I gave Reed all his ideas, actually. He stole them all from me over a couple drinks one day. I'm just kidding, Reed, if you're listening. Just a joke. Never even met you. But he raises a great point.
Yeah.
He raises a great point. That there is no longer that expectation. And so I do think that we're going to see, I think we're entering in an age of an entrepreneurship.
Okay. And so that's going to mean that in 20 or 30 years, they're going to have to pass that along to their successors. That's going to be interesting. We're going to talk about that when we get back from the break. Stay tuned. This is Attila Ceres with Think Tech Friday. We're back, we're alive, and you're listening to Think Tech Friday. I'm your host, Attila Ceres, here with Matt Digeronimo, talking about the secret to small business survival in Hawaii. When we last left the conversation, we were talking about how so many small businesses are dependent on one person. This was during the break. We were actually talking a little bit more about that. And, now we're going to get to the real secret. These are these 5 items that you and I talked about that really, if any business made a conscious effort to follow these 5 items, which you're going to be able to find on our website, thinktechfriday.com, they'd be in good shape.
Absolutely.
And so let's talk about the very first one, the big question.
Okay, and I'll say before we launch into these survival techniques, the beauty of this is that not only do these issues help protect the businesses against external events, they also pay off huge when it comes time to sell the business. So whether you're in year 2 or year 20, or whether you're going to sell in the next 6 months or the next 60 years, this list would be the same for both.
Okay, so it still makes... And, if you have questions about this list, give us a call, 296-5467.
Best question will receive 3 invisible gold stars.
There you go, 296-5467, and I'll throw an extra gold star and a happy face on top of that.
4 invisible gold stars and a happy face. How
go.
could you not call in?
So, our first one, what is it? What do we do?
The business has to be operated such that it is not dependent upon the owner. I mean, that's everything else on the list that we're going to talk about is, can the business run without you? And there's a handful of ways to put that litmus test out there. Can you go to a golf camp for 2 weeks and leave your cell phone and your computer at home? And when you came back, what would your business look like? I mean, if it would look like Thunderdome and there's dogs and cats living together, and you're completely bankrupt, I got news for you. Okay, your business is not protected against things like a flu outbreak in the area. It's not protected against changes and advances in technology. It's not protected against personnel changes. It's not protected against government policy changes. And you're in no shape to sell your business. So the number one, the foundation behind all of these things that we talk about is making the business less dependent upon the owner. And in my observation, that is the number one factor here in Hawaii that's the number one challenge for business owners here in Hawaii.
But you said earlier that 90% of all businesses are small businesses, meaning they probably don't have a lot of employees. They probably are family-based. There's, mom and pop are working together to make the business work. If pop gets sick, how does mom do his job? How do we structure a business like that?
Okay, well, I mean, I think when we use the word small business, I don't think that we want to default to the literal mom and pop organization, because if it's literally mom and pop at this convenience store, well, I don't got much for them. You know what I mean? Other than, maybe open up a second store and figure out a way how to manage more than one store. But you'd be surprised. I mean, small and medium-sized businesses. So I mean, that can go really. That's under an umbrella here in Hawaii. You could be talking about a business that's $20 million in revenue, $50 million in revenue. I mean, there's still businesses that are not accountable to the SEC laws of publicly traded companies, and they still have challenges associated with this. So when we talk about these particular topics, I think we're talking for businesses that have anywhere between 5 and 100 employees.
So between 5 and 100 employees, it shouldn't depend solely on the owner, and I think that makes sense. There's enough people to cover. Yeah.
But there's a dichotomy here that is challenging to get through, and right smack in the middle as that obstacle is the ego. Right, because when we're a small business owner, there's a part of us that's like, we are the small business owner. I could wear pink slippers to work if I want, and what I say goes, and you do that because that's the way I said you do it. And as a consequence, you become the center of everything. And some business owners gravitate towards that. But what they're actually doing is they're damaging their businesses, and it's certainly damaging their options for the future, either growth or sale of their business. So we encourage our clients to take steps to make the business owner a smaller and smaller asset of the company until it's a negligible asset. Like most business owners are the largest asset of the company.
Okay, so would you say that of your clients, because you do mergers and acquisitions, you have people coming in all the time, would you say that most businesses walking in, it's more the exception than the rule, that the owner is the center of the whole operation?
I think there's a pretty good distribution. I think there's a decent shaped bell curve that's probably just shifted over. Meaning, yes, the average company has issues with the business owner playing too large of a role.
Right.
But it's not binary, right? It's not go, no go. We see sort of a spectrum of involvement in the business owners, and sometimes it makes the business unsellable. I mean, the financials are great on paper. Private equity company in California says, "I'll get paid these guys $75 gazillion for the business," and then they come out here and they look around and they realize like there's no policies for anything. I don't even know who's responsible for what. How are the employees trained? And I said, forget it. We're out. Even though their financials are pristine.
So that's number 2 on your list.
That's right. I gave us a good segue into
there
that.
There you go. Thank you.
I'm working. I know. I read a book about television interviews last night, so I'm trying to roll some of that stuff in there. Reed, that was actually a draft of Reed's second book.
Oh, okay, good.
Again, just kidding. Reed never met you.
So what is item number 2?
Policies and procedures. Absolutely.
Policies and procedures.
We got Kivanzi in the studio here behind the camera laughing at me, and I'm on him every single day. Every day. I mean, right? It goes from the way we, he writes down brew coffee, and I'm like, okay, I'm brand new. I walk up to the coffee thing. What do? Brew coffee. Like, do you say it to the pot? Brew coffee. I mean, if you're out of it, where do you buy it? Where do we keep it? He says, check to see that there's enough office supplies every day. Really? What do you check? Well, I just check pens, paper. How many pens? How many pieces of paper? And it's ridiculous, right? So I'm being kind of silly here, but the point is, there's no reason why a business with 10 employees shouldn't run with the same standards of exactness as a Fortune 500 company. And unless we are writing down what we're doing. I'll give you an example that you're going to be able to empathize with. Every small business knows this. And I tell my staff, look, this is the red flag, okay? When you hear what I'm about to do, somebody says, red flag, okay, and it sounds like this. Hey, where's the, how do we do that thing? We've got that client who needs the ABC. How do we do that? I don't know. Paul normally does that. Well, where's Paul? I don't know, Paul's out on the road with, okay, call Paul. He's not answering. Okay, doesn't he have the password though written down underneath? No, I don't think so. Hey, Stacy, you used to have, yeah, the password used to, okay, that's red flag. Red flag, stop. We're off the reservation. This is not the way we run a business. But yet every small business, it deals with those types of situations.
That's what Post-it notes are for. Come on. Why else would we buy Post-it notes?
You're right. It's either rigid policies and procedures or Post-it notes. One or two, take your pick. But the point is, and yes, sometimes it takes, I'm a little bit extreme in terms of the examples that I give, but my point is that, like, we were talking about the flu, right? So if I have a business that's going to be hurt because my office manager gets the flu, if it hurts me enough that it, like, affects my business or puts me out of business, that's natural selection at play. Because my business should not be so weak and so vulnerable to have a loss of one employee affect my my business enough that CNN is writing articles about it.
Yeah, and this one here in CNN, that one's about care homes. So if someone has the flu, they can't physically go and take care of someone in their home. Now that person suffers, right? And then they lose the client because that person still needs service. So there's always that flow of business. But if you can't match it because you're sick, it all falls apart, right?
That's right. But I mean, I would say that at some point every business should be able to say, okay, let's look around us. If any of us got hit by a car tomorrow, would the business still survive? And if the answer is no, why not? And what can we do about it? The reason that normally doesn't happen is because having the luxury of being able to sit around and talk about something like that is something that most business owners don't have. Because I got bills to pay and this guy, and I got to call that guy back, and I have 500 emails, and I got to update my Facebook page, and now the phone's ringing. And so what we end up having, we were a ping pong ball all day long until it's like, until the Fred Flintstone bell rings, and then we go home. So, how do we carve out that time? And again, Zia's going to laugh here, but I always say you got to make the routine things routine. As soon as I can make the routine things routine, like, we can't have a discussion about the fax machine ever again. Okay, we have a fax. People send faxes. Okay, there can never be confusion about how that thing works. Because it's not just annoying, it's sucking up the resources in terms of the most valuable one, which is time. And our own mental energy. I mean, the routine things have to be routine. If I can get the routine things routine, then I can carve out time to look at vulnerabilities in my company and things like policies and procedures that may be sort of in the margin. So I could have a policy. There's no reason I shouldn't have a policy that says bringing in a temp for my office manager. My office manager calls in sick. I call a temp agency. Most businesses, if a temp showed up, they'd sit there like, what do? They'll just answer the phones, and then if they need anything, come get me. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's
yeah. But, and that's most, right?
Right, but if I say, look, your daily responsibilities are here on this page, okay? Yeah, there's your computer. Here are your daily responsibilities. Follow this, read this, and if you have questions, find me. Night and day difference. Night and day difference. But again, to get to the point where I'm writing a procedure for what happens if one of my guys calls out sick, it's not necessarily about having the ability to do that. Although that in and of itself can be challenging for some. In most cases, it's about carving out the time to do it.
And so really this is just about sitting down and just doing it. And we're going to talk about doing that a little bit more when we get back from the break. This is Attila Suresh with Think Tech Friday. Stay tuned. We'll be back after the break. We're back. We're live, and you're listening to Think Tech Friday. Those of you out in the internet world listening to us live streaming, thank you. We appreciate you tuning in. We're here talking with Matthew Digeronimo, talking about the secret to small business survival here in Hawaii. But first, before we get back to the conversation, our producer here, Jay Fidel, has got an announcement about the transportation program. Tell us, what's that all about, Jay?
Well, I know you're going to do this anyway, but I want to do a shout out today, actually, Attila, to Leah Rodriguez. to Jack Waters, to Patrick Leonard, our people at KGU who help us. I also want to say that this is a great show, honestly. You know, nice job, Attila.
Thanks,
Matt,
guys.
You're terrific. You ought to go on the radio. Actually, Matt.
Do you know any good stations that are down here that would? I'm looking for a station. I'm not happy with the one I'm at. I could tell you stories about the management of the station that I'm with right now that would blow your mind. We're not. This isn't on right now, is it? Okay.
That's why you got to shout out here once in a while. You know? Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to say that what you're talking about is really helpful to startups, and that includes tech startups. I hope they're listening today, but it also includes nonprofit startups. It even includes organizations like Think Tech Hawaii. I'm making notes of what you're saying. This is very valuable. My question, though, Matt, is how did you learn all this in the nuclear Navy? How did you learn all this running for Congress? Where'd you pick this up?
Well, I think what I learned in the submarine world and spending a lot of time in the nuclear engineering world prior to my Navy times, everything is procedural. Everything is procedural. And what we learned very quickly is that a procedure that looks like it's overdone or a little bit too burdensome, you can find out very quickly that it's not when you fail to follow it. And that you find out that it's all written in blood, meaning, so I think it was Mark Twain that said that I'm not going to we learn from other people's mistakes because I'm not going to be able to live long enough to learn them all myself. So a lot of it was just sort of learning how to manage a group of 60-some people in a nuclear power plant. But the other thing that really has nothing to do with me and just the benefit of my industry is that we work with business owners day in and day out, and we see the same things over and over and over again. And you can't help but, even though I'm the dumbest guy in any room I walk into, eventually I can recognize a pattern. Like, geez, the best businesses, the businesses where the people are cashing out for, just absolute jackpots, what are they doing that's different than the people who have businesses that are unsellable? Because they both work just as hard, but they made different decisions.
Yeah, this is very valuable. So tell the people when you're on KGU, the unnamed station, when you're on, and the name of your show and all that.
Absolutely. I do host the Smith Floyd Water Cooler, which is on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. on 760. And and I make a lot of noises, just like I just did there.
Water cooler sounds like a sitcom, water cooler.
Yeah, well, we drink a lot of water on the show. I find that drinking water just no breaks. That's the challenge. No, you wouldn't believe what goes on in that studio. That's the challenge.
Ever hear of a Boilerman's helper? Never mind.
No. I think I got a visual here that's just distracting me. The Smith Floyd Water Cooler, we talk about these types of issues for small and medium-sized businesses in the community, and we also do our best to put as many resources on our website, which is smithfloyd.com, as we can, and invite people to tune in on Wednesdays or check us out on the World Wide Web.
Thank you, Matt. But I did want to talk about transportation. We're having a program that is the Think Tech and HVCA organizations that collaborate every month. As Matt knows, because he was on one of our programs on the Jones Act.
A lot of fun.
He and Colleen Hunter-Busa got into a great discussion at that time. Made it very popular, actually.
Yeah, I think she had a good time, too.
We're not sure, but okay. February 28th, we're doing a program on transportation. We call it Transportation in Hawaii. And the tagline is, how are we getting around these days? Which is a, multiple compound question for sure. And it's 11:30 for lunch, and it runs to 1:30. We have a panel of 8 people. This is major. Wow. Our moderator is Cheryl Soon. We have an opening speaker, Senator Kalani English, who's the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. We're going to move fast with 8 people. We have government, we have industry, and we have academia. We're going to have, great little articles, talks coming from various places about transportation. Come one, come all, find out what's shaking, and more important, what's moving. What's moving in transportation. February 28th. Sign up today at hvca.org. It's February 28th, the Plaza Club. See you there, or be square. I hope you come, Matt.
I'll be there.
All right, good. Thank you, Attila. Back to you.
Of course. Well, thanks for Thanks for sharing that. That does remind me, last week we were talking about electric cars. We had an electric car expert on here. Fascinating stuff. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion, seeing what the roads are looking like, or what they're going to look like in 10 years. That's neat stuff.
Yeah, I'd be very. I think there's going to be a wide variety of opinions at that event because it comes from all angles, and I think the most challenging part is trying to get people to be talking about the same thing, because there's a lot of the transportation discussion that's really about the development of Hawaii in the future, and that which takes the topic away from what the electric car people want to talk about, which is fuel, which is different than what I want to talk about, which is traffic, which is why I showed up into the studio 30 seconds before we went on air, because I'll tell you what's not moving or shaking is H1 today, Jay.
That's a typical day. Look, I live out in Neva Beach. You got nothing. You got nothing. Most people would be surprised at the number of hours that are spent.
You're a tech guy, hovercraft.
That's right. I would canoe to work if I could. It would be great. But, let's talk about our secrets here, because we're still not done yet, and we still want to share this valuable information with all the small business owners. And during the break, we were talking about actually doing these things. So remember, the first one was, can your business run without you? How do you find a way? Number 2 was policies and procedures. Do you have any in place? And then we did organizational setup, right? What are the duties and responsibilities of each person? And we're talking about, how do you actually do that? And as a business, when the phone's ringing and you're checking 500 emails at once, and that reminded me of a Japanese proverb I heard, which was it was about a story of someone who wanted to move a river, and so father and son go down to the shore, and they look at the river and it's flowing by, and they want to move the river from one place to the next. And so the father says, look, son, all you have to do is put in one rock at a time. So every day you go down there and you put in one rock, and eventually, as the son grew up, he actually moved the river. The flow of the river went a different direction, because those slow, directed efforts, daily efforts, made a huge difference in the whole flow of that river. And I think the analogy is, in your business, you can do that every day. I mean, I spend 2 minutes a day cleaning my garage. Makes a big difference after a week, too. You'd be surprised. So just those little efforts in a business, and just to make it better. It seems to me like that's a good place to start. Would you agree?
I think you're right on the money.
Oh, perfect.
I think you're right on the money. And furthermore, I think it's the only way to do it. I mean, unless you got one of those, remember this movie that Adam Sandler was in, where he had a remote control for life and he could just pause it? And if I get one of those, it'd be awesome, because I'd pause and then I'd unpause some people in the business and say, okay, since everyone else is frozen, let's work on these policies and procedures. But when life keeps coming at you, and business keeps coming at you, and there's invoices to pay, and there's clients to serve, and there's employees that are sick, you normally don't have the time to do the things that I'm talking about. And oftentimes, I think business owners hear this kind of discussion, and they just kind of tune out. And it's not because they disagree with it, but it's just they say, well, you're right, but you know what? I'm going to deal with that when fill in the blank. And it's always something, right? Today is never the right time to do anything. Right? There's always a reason to say, well, once revenue gets above this, once we get through this client, once I hire this new person, once so-and-so gets healthy. But that never happens.
And you were saying earlier that the businesses that are walking into your office that are acquired for millions of dollars, and those that are not, work just as hard, right?
Absolutely.
So they work this. It's just they're not doing that kind of regular, directed effort to improve themselves.
That's right, because the culture of a company develops with or without your participation, right? So whether or not there's enough external factors out there that if you do nothing, you will be defined by the things that happen to you. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, that's in our lives, it's in our relationships, and it's in our business. So the idea of, for example, we talked about policies and procedures, or your organizational setup, duties and responsibilities. At some point, you have to say, just throw a pebble in the river. Just do it. Just today. If it's 2 minutes, that's fine. If you can carve out the time to say, can somebody, and watch this, can somebody please make a procedure for how we make coffee? Meaning, why do we ever run out of coffee filters? How could that ever happen? We're a company that makes these high-tech products that put men on the moon, and we run out of coffee filters, and now we have this client coming in, and so-and-so's got to run to the store. How does that happen? And you say, well, come on, Matt. Well, I'll tell you what. Do it. And I did this with Zia earlier today, and I said, okay, I'm going to follow this. Like I'm just some man off the street. And you read it, and you can't do it. The procedure doesn't work. And so it's not about coffee. But it's about developing the culture that gets behind the idea that things have to be written down, and it has to work. Because let's say you take the 10% of businesses that do write stuff down. 60% of them write it down, and then they pat themselves on the back, and then it goes on a book that sits on the shelf, and no one uses it. Or when they do use it, it's outdated, or it doesn't work. Or they say, I don't know, the form's in here somewhere. Right? So I recommend starting with coffee, or starting with how you answer the phone, or how you work the fax machine, just because what you'll find is it is not easy to get people to do even the simplest tasks in a standardized way. And that's important because your clients don't respond necessarily to quality. Clients respond to consistency. We don't go to Starbucks because if you're looking for the best cup of coffee on the island, it's not necessarily Starbucks, but I know what I'm going to get. And so oftentimes consistency, regardless of who's sick, is more important than quality.
Sure. I used to travel all over the country. Guess where we would eat all the time? Denny's. You knew where you're going to get, you knew how much it was going to cost, and you knew that the food was going to be manageable.
And how do you think they make Moons Over Miami taste the same in Maine and Southern California? I mean, they're getting their ingredients from different places. They have people of entirely different cultures. I mean, there's a lot of differences, but yet if you tasted even a small difference, you would immediately be like, whoa, what is this? I'm at a Denny's. This is supposed to take. You know how much work that takes? So the difference between Denny's and an independently owned restaurant that says, I think we're in a franchise. Okay, you think you're in a franchise? That's great. I mean, Denny's started with one too. But the difference is standardization. Because as soon as something is dependent upon me verbally telling someone, you do it this way, you could forget it. You're going to hit a wall at a certain amount of growth that you just can't get through.
Well, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier about how when people walk into your office and they're ready to sell their company, how do they see it? But you know what? We're going to talk about that in our final segment. Stick with us. This is Attila Ceres. We're talking with Matt Digeronimo on Think Tech Friday. We'll be right back.
I guess we got it.
We're back, we're live, and you're listening to Think Tech Friday. I'm your host, Attila Ceres. We're talking with Matt Digeronimo about the secret to business survival in Hawaii. Now, when people go to sell their business, they felt they put in their hard-earned years, they're ready to go. What happens? They come to you, and they feel like they should be given a big paycheck and reward for their hard work. Does that sound right?
It's a great way to say it, and I think unfortunately, that separates those who have run their business such that there is a big payoff at the end, and those who have run their business where there's not. And as we said before, oftentimes they're working equally as hard, but they're just choosing to do different things. And the difference in the mindset is that there are many business owners who, when they think about selling their business, they kind of visualize it almost as if, like, I've run a race or I've played a game, now it's over, where's my prize? Like, look how well I did. Look at my finances. Look how much money I made. Where's my prize? The reality of the matter is the business valuation and the successful sale of a business has a lot more to do with how well did you prepare your business for someone else. It's like preparing your home for a guest.
Oh, I see.
Not how well did you do, how well did you prepare it? Because the number one concern of the buyers of small and medium-sized businesses is that I'm going to buy this business, the owner's going to walk away, they're going to take their friends and family with them, and then I'm going to be stuck with nothing. A bunch of phones that don't ring. That's the number one concern. So if we can alleviate that to show the potential buyers, no, we got this under control. We have policies and procedures. Our employees are trained. We have a training program. I have an organizational chart, which, by the way, quick quick side note, I want to mention something about the organizational chart. Most small businesses, if I ask them, let me see your organizational chart, they draw like one box and then write their name in the middle of it, right?
And then they're done. Right.
And then they're done. And a tip that I learned from reading Mr. Gerber's The E-Myth was that right from the beginning, make an organizational chart for your business, not as it is today, but as you envision it to be 5 or 10 years from now.
Oh, I see.
So if you have, would you have someone that managed IT? Would you have some human resources? How many sales associates would you have? And obviously, all plans change. And if in the beginning you're a one-man show, then you write your name into every single one of those boxes.
There you go.
And as you bring people in, you then push off, say, okay, I'm no longer the webmaster. But if I was smart, when I was doing the webmaster stuff, I take up just a fraction of a second to say, okay, now I am the webmaster. Okay, what am I doing? And am I just doing it because I know it? Or am I doing it and then in parallel with that writing down what I'm doing so that I won't have to be the webmaster forever?
Oh,
Or
I see.
HR. So now when I bring someone in, I say, okay, here you go. Here's the stuff that you need to do to be the webmaster. And then I change my org chart and I write in Kevon Zia's name, and he's the webmaster, and I'm no longer. And now I'm building a vision. I've created a vision, and now I'm building it. And that org chart, in my opinion, creates a very powerful visual that you can put right somewhere in your business and by your computer, on your desk, that you can look at every day to remind yourself of what you're trying to build.
And then that also gives you a baseline for comparison. So say, for instance, you're not the best salesperson, but when you bring in a better salesperson and they are better at their job than you are, you're the baseline, right?
That's right.
Because you're the business owner that has to be able to do everything. But let's go through these last two so we don't leave our collars hanging. But we have the managing risk of revenue. How susceptible are you to a single event? And we talked about that with the flu. But you gave me an example earlier about if you're a sunglass company and you sell sunglasses, you should probably sell umbrellas. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, that analogy comes right out of Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. But the point is, we have to take a look at not just how much revenue we have coming in, but where is it coming from and what are we providing to get it? So, for example, if 80% of our revenue is coming from one client, and it also turns out that one client was a high school buddy of ours, or that someone that we golf with every weekend, or just what is that one? Is that one company? Are they in an industry that could be antiquated by a new piece of technology, or are they? What if they turn this over to the second generation and it collapses? Which it kind of is in the same ballpark of what if some employees don't show up because there's flu. We're trying to protect ourselves from external events. And looking at our revenue streams is an important issue, not only to protect the survivability of our business, but also for how sellable is the business. Because a savvy business buyer, one of the first things they'll look at is, I don't care you did $5 million in revenue. Where did it come from? Oh, well, it came from these 35 people. Okay, did any of those 35 people account for more than 25% of your revenue?
Yeah, and your insurance agent is going to have that same question with you. So a lot of these questions, it seems like, are already out there with life insurance agents. They're going to ask you what happens to you if you die. What happens to your business. They're going to. I know. My general liability and professional liability insurance guy. He comes in. He says, "All right, you have to tell me what are your top producing customers. How much are they giving you? What percentage? And if that percentage is too high, they're going to say, well, we're sorry."
Sure.
So, there is some diversification. And then the last item, just real quick, we were talking about back office management. So most businesses focus on the service they provide, but they don't really think about the back office, the HR portion. And what's your solution to that?
My solution is determine as a business owner what are the things that only you can do.
Okay.
And then do those things. Most business owners fall into the trap of doing the things that they can do. Meaning, I can do my books, and therefore I'm not going to bring in somebody else to do it. I will do it myself because I can do it. And I'm not going to hire someone to do my website because I can do it. But are you the only person that can do it? Because usually the thing that makes your business special and the thing that puts your business prepares your business for growth is the service that you provide and the passion of the owner. But like many business owners will tell you is, I don't have time to do the thing that I love to do so much. Like I love painting walls, but I can never paint. I can never go out and paint because I'm stuck with all this other stuff that I have to do. So if I can focus on what are the things that only I can do and do those, bite the bullet on the other things that you can do it. You could drive a car with your feet too. It doesn't make it a good idea, right? I mean, like bring in professionals, pay the money, and have them do it. Take it off your plate if it's not something that you can do in-house. And remember, when we're looking at, does that save us expenses? Most people only think in dollars. We got to think of terms of dollars and hours being an interchangeable currency.
Right, because when you're out there doing what you really love, you're bringing in money also.
That's right.
So if you do more of that, and that passion flows through to the customer, and the customers are more attracted to you in that way.
Right. So
That all works.
most owners say, well, I don't want to pay $150 a month for that. But what they're not considering is how much value is being added by the time that they will now be able to spend because they're not doing that thing.
Wow, interesting discussion. And unfortunately, we are out of time, but this was so much fun. Thank you for coming on to Think Tech.
Well, thanks for
Really
having
appreciate
me.
it.
Jay, thanks for having me. It was an honor to be here.
If you missed any part of this program, be sure to visit our website to download the podcast. The website is thinktechhawaii.com. That's ThinkTechHawaii.com. And if you like our program, go ahead and like us on Facebook. This is Attila Suresh, your host for Think Tech Friday. Thanks to our Chief Engineer, Jack Waters, Account Manager, Patrick Leonard, Board Operator is Leah Rodriguez, and Jay Fidel, whose passion makes Think Tech possible. And thank you for listening. You make the show possible. We'll be back next Friday, but be sure to tune in Wednesday with Jay Fidel for more Think Tech. Remember to appreciate life, do good to others, and have a great weekend. Aloha.